about it, so it's okay. No, no, thank you. So Mr. Shahid Siddiqui, Mr. Ramesh Kumar, Mr. Roshan Beg, Mansoor Khan, my friend and colleague Akar Patel. Uh, I thought I will be the first to speak, but I think the whole order has been inverted, and it's a pretty hard act to follow after Mr. Ramesh Kumar has spoken. And I was delighted to hear him speak in English today because I was telling him I've always heard you speak in Kannada, and your Kannada is so exemplary and you speak so captivatingly. But your English is equally, been captivating. So I thank you for speaking so well today. And then, of course, Mr. Shahid Siddiqui's book, I'll be speaking about it. Akar has stolen a couple of themes that I wanted to touch upon, but then I'll still try and elaborate on that. I feel very tempted to respond to Mr. Ramesh Kumar's mention of the emergency because my latest book is on the emergency. But I'll refrain from that because I've been speaking so much about it in my book there, so I'll refrain from that. But I'll just mention one thing. He mentioned JP, but the emergency that JP opposed of Indira Gandhi was not the first emergency he opposed. This is particularly interesting because in Mr. Shahid Siddiqui's book, the narrative of the Nehru years is not flat. It's actually a very interesting and very objective reconstruction of the Nehru years that he presents. So JP did not just oppose Indira Gandhi's emergency, he also opposed Nehru's emergency, which is not spoken about. Nehru's emergency was as bad, and the characters were the same. In fact, George Fernandez was in the jail and was tortured as much as he was tortured during Indira Gandhi's time. In fact, JP in 63, I quote this in my book, gives an interview to the Times of India in Patna, and he calls Nehru almost a fascist. He says he's gotten used to power. People who've tasted power, it's like tasting blood. They won't give it up. Why does he want the emergency to continue after the war is over? So he questions Nehru in such a way. But then, of course, there is a certain kind of decency and decorum in the exchange that he writes another letter, Nehru responds to him, he writes back, all that happens. So I feel very tempted to respond to questions and speak about the emergency, but I'll avoid that because I think the book that Mr. Shahid Siddiqui has written is far more interesting and has to be discussed today, and I will do that. First and foremost, I want to congratulate Mr. Shahid Siddiqui because he's written an absolute page turner. That's the first big test of a book. And I think Akar has mentioned, Ramesh Kumar has also mentioned it. It's an absolute page turner. So you will enjoy reading it. So please do pick up a copy of the book. Books are written for a variety of reasons. For some, it may be a kind of professional need. For some, it may be very cathartic. I'm saying all this because I find the motive behind Mr. Shahid Siddiqui writing this book very different. So for some, it's a professional need. For some, it is cathartic. For some, it is just about improving their social and cultural portfolio. They want to be in circulation, so there are books to be in circulation. And some also, especially in recent times, they just want to loudly demonstrate their ideological conformity, so they write books. A book also becomes a kind of an irresistible urge for a few people because they don't want to suppress something that's happening inside to write books. For some of it, it may be a very nice romantic idea to be called an author, so they write books. These are all perfectly legitimate reasons. I'm not trying to judge one over the other. There are different kinds of writers in the marketplace, and they're all perfectly legitimate reasons. One can only reflect on them but not judge them. However, I did not detect any of these as dominant motives or as compulsion behind Mr. Siddiqui's act of writing this book. As I read it, and I read it from cover to cover, I felt it was just another milestone in his rich life as an owner editor of a very popular Urdu newspaper and someone who also ventured into politics. So it's just another milestone for him. But besides that, to write this book, like writing any other book for anybody, has of course been a political act for Mr. Siddiqui. Much more than that, I felt it was an anxious journal of record. This is something I wanted to say. It's an anxious journal of record for him. It's about wanting to put things in place and perspective before they're all forgotten or lost. One detects that anxiety constantly in the book. That is an anxiety that kicks in when one looks back and is astonished at the kind of extraordinary journey that destiny has arranged for him. And in other words, the gifts that life has unexpectedly showered on him. There's another kind of anxiety that supports the construction of this book, I witnessed, which is, and that is the more important thing for me, is the anxiety of constructive engagement. I think my friend Akar kind of touched it, but it's the anxiety of constructive engagement to not become incommunicado with any event of history or any personality in history. So that this element of him, the anxiety to not become incommunicado at any event in history is something that I feel has driven me to write this book, and such an exhaustive book of 380 pages odd. Now, my friend and colleague here, Akar, and I have written books too. And one may turn around and ask, why did you write your books? To enrich what and which portfolio? Or what anxiety drove you? I do not know what Akar's anxieties were, but for me, I had become unemployed in Mr. Modi's New India, and I had to earn a living. So writing was the only trade I knew. So I began writing in book columns and my books. And it was not an act of protest or resistance. That's important. It was not an act of protest or resistance to write, but an act to communicate and celebrate a certain independence of being unaffiliated to anybody or any institution. See, I had been the editor of the biggest newspaper in the state. I had been with Vinod for 10 years. So there is a certain unaffiliated thing which I want to celebrate. So I didn't want to start writing to protest something or resist something. And that's exactly what I see in Mr. Shahid Siddiqui. Because there's no cynicism in his writing. That is a fantastic quality in a writer. And I don't see a trace of cynicism in him. So there was a great need in me also to dismiss cynicism and gloom, because I stopped being an editor in 2019. So it's almost 6 years now. So that time of CAA and NRC protest and all that, there was a kind of a gloom and cynicism about what is going to happen with India. And so, but I wanted to search for possibilities to constructively and optimistically engage with the world. No matter how impossible it was. A lot of people were telling you it is impossible. Well, I wish I had another skill which was more profitable than writing, but sadly I did not possess one, so I continued to write. I identify this element of independence and the deep need to constructively engage with the world in Mr. Siddiqui too. He is my senior peer in the profession, and I have enormous regard for him. So it's exactly that. So when I was reading this book, I was going through my own emotional turbulence that I had faced in 2019. So his book has done a lot of good to me. So I enjoyed reading it. So one of the brightest things about this book is that it is not cynical, as I have mentioned. Whatever the situation, whatever the difficulty, whatever the change in political situation, Mr. Siddiqui plots a constructive intervention. That is him. So if you read this book, whichever government he is talking, he's trying to talk to everybody. And I think I find that as a very great quality, and a quality which is actually becoming very rare. So it's not that Mr. Siddiqui is naive. It's not that he does not understand the difficult questions and deep problems he writes about, but it is in his nature to be engaged with society. It is in his nature not to close doors. In fact, there is one repetitive scene throughout the book. This it's not a book of fiction, but I would still call it. There is a repetitive scene. If you're reading those chapters, there is one thing that keeps coming, which is someone always calls him, or he calls someone, and they meet to discuss. You will find this always happening in the book. This may look like a simple act, but in reality, it is not so simple. It is also not about networking. He's not calling somebody to network. It is about engagement. That engagement is a very, very central quality of Mr. Siddiqui. The kind of polarized atmosphere that we live today, this ability to call and meet someone who's not exactly on your side, or someone who does not think like you, is a very rare act. It's a very special gift and quality that Mr. Siddiqui possesses. And I sometimes feel it's a lost quality in our society. And I hope this book inspires at least a few to build their own ideas of constructive engagement, to recover the gift of communication across ideological barriers. If that does not happen, then I don't think there's any hope for democracy in India. If you don't build your own ideas of constructive engagement, then there is absolutely no hope for democracy in India. This absence of constructive engagement with one's opponents is a phenomenon that we witness across the globe. It is not just happening in India. So that's why Mr. Siddiqui's book is a very special thing, because he's teaching you something without teaching you that quality. So this is something that you witness across the globe, not just in India. Even in a democracy like United States, even before Trump, the battle lines are so rigidly drawn that the Democrats and Republicans find it very difficult to engage with each other. When I was researching my book, I found something very interesting, which is that this trend of political non-engagement in the US picked up in the mid-1970s during the Carter era. In the mid-1970s, when slowly, what happened was, which is exactly what you see in India today, what happened was that moderates began to disappear in political parties. Moderates were gone in political parties. Each party had a fair share of, before that, even during Nixon's time, which was supposedly a horrendous time in American politics, there were people who were liberals, moderates, and conservatives in each political party. And whenever the issues, depending on the issues, they would engage with each other. And that engagement is completely gone. And in America, it started in the mid-70s. I say this because in this book, if you ask the question, when did India become like that? When did political parties in India stop communicating with each other? It is actually, if you read Mr. Siddiqui's life very closely, it actually started when he exited the Congress Party. That is the end of the 1990s, if I'm right. So that exit marks a kind of a historical point in Indian politics where parties stopped engaging between themselves. The moderates had gone. People like him who were inveterate communicators had gone. So the big parties stopped talking to each other. So that is something that I found fascinating in this book. His life, in fact, he was born in the 1950s, so he's actually not a midnight's child like Rushdie, but actually he is a republic's child. So India becomes a republic, 1950, right? So he's a child of the republic, a child of the constitutional engagement. That process had started. So the structure of the book is in such a way that he engages at every phase and every bend from the 1950 on, if I'm right, sir. So that's something very interesting. And if one were to keep this, so this point I made. So it's the 1990s. If one were to keep his book in mind and trace the non-engagement or disengagement of political parties, it's the 1990s. So until the 1990s, people with Mr. Siddiqui's mindset and access could walk in practically into any leader's drawing room and put an idea across. Actually, you find it so much in his book. He's calling, Ahmed Patel is calling him up and saying, kebab mil jayega. Can I come for kebab? And it's 12 o'clock in the night. So somebody else is calling, VP Singh is calling, Arun Nehru is calling. So many people, there's so many crisscrossing and engagement of that's happening. So you could practically walk into any leader's drawing room and put an idea across, but that is not possible today. Absolutely. And that is not possible today. I spend half my time in Delhi every month, and I know how difficult it is to sort of get into any leader's drawing room. Forget entering the gate. So that is very, very important to sort of observe in the context of this book. So this book provokes this question as to how does one create these bridges again? Because if this book is to be seen as some kind of a thing that can be used to speak about our own democracy, because it's about our democracy. He's a republic's child, as I told you. So how does one build these bridges, and how does one begin to talk again? So that's a very important question. This said, there is another very interesting quality of this book, which is, I wouldn't say it is iconoclastic in nature. I wouldn't use the word iconoclastic, but it does not unreservedly embrace any personality. And I think that's a very journalistic quality of micro subversions. No, this fullest book of micro subversions. No, right from Nehru through Indira Gandhi, through Rajiv Gandhi, through P.V. Narasimha Rao, and right up to Narendra Modi. Mr. Siddiqui will tell you what was great about them, and you start getting very panicky. And this used to happen to me. I start getting very panicky that he's painting a one-sided picture. Why is he doing this? You get agitated, and suddenly he throws a bomb. He suddenly subverts the situation, and he starts caveating and qualifying his remarks. And that is a typical journalistic structure. And he begins looking at these people, describing them as a fellow politician when he starts describing them. And suddenly in the middle, he's awake, his journalistic instinct is awakened, and he starts subverting. So, and that, as my great editor, late editor Vinod used to say, have we restored the balance? That was his famous line. And he used to call us on Saturday after the edition was out, and some big story we were broken, and he would say, I shouldn't use four-letter words here. He would say, Vinod was famous for it. He would say, forget all that. Have we restored the balance? Baad mein dekha jayega. I said, sir, we may attract a case for this. He said, if we go down together, but have we restored the balance? But that is the kind of instinctual thing which you get to see in this book. So the structure of this book, I would claim him through this book more as a journalist than as a politician or a political activist. So I want him to be in my profession. Yeah. So the other reason that I'll complete this whole thing in another 5-10 minutes. So the other reason that this book came across as interesting to me is because it offers a rich worldview and experience of a competent bilingual, which my friend Akar took away that point from me. So he's a very competent bilingual, and I pride myself as a competent bilingual. And it's not, I mean, the pride is because your worldview is so much bigger. You see so much more than a flat Anglophone. Today, the problem in India is your historians are monolingual Anglophones, your big editors are monolingual Anglophones, and they just don't understand the cultural complexity of India because they are not bilinguals. You know, Akar is happily a bilingual. I am a bilingual. Shahid Bhai is a bilingual. So that's one of the greatest qualities of this book. And therefore, the cultural detailing in the book, which is what interests me as a writer, the cultural detailing in the book, which sometimes, food becomes the metaphor there. I mentioned kebab. So the cultural detailing comes through the metaphor of food there. So that is very, very fascinating. And from this point of view, my most favorite chapters in the book, which I will recommend to you, is the early chapters. Those are actually really well written and brilliant. When Mr. Siddiqui is speaking about his childhood, the atmosphere of old Delhi, Billy Maran, it's something that is not very familiar to people in the south from us, but I mean, that's a whole different world. And the struggles of his father, Mr. Ramesh Kumar, spoke about it, and the struggles of establishing the language newspaper. And there again, I mean, I wish he had written more about it. My quib with this book is that you did not write more about that, which is, I mean, he is trying to establish a magazine, a newspaper, a weekly in the Urdu language, and it's not, it's the mechanics of it is not the problem. The problem is of the audience. The audience, it's exactly the kind of situation we have in Canada today, where the middle class audience has migrated. And so once the middle class audience has migrated, your quality of the paper that you actually want to give them suffers, and your advertising suffers. And so imagine the kind of struggles that he must have had. The paper shuts down, he reopens it. All kinds of struggles happen. He starts a magazine, which, yeah, yeah, which he thinks, when he's bringing in all his reading and literature, but there's nobody to read. And that's the sad state of post-partition India. And it's also the obituary of Urdu in India. That, in his book, is something that I found very moving. And I wish that becomes a separate book, sir. And that's actually, that memoir would actually contribute so much more, because that is lost completely. And now we are debating about Hindi and Urdu and which is big, which is small. But that world is something which he describes with a great deal of fascination. So, an Anglophone intellectual, as I said, in India is the problem today. So the perspectives are so limited. In fact, I don't know if I should make this snide remark. There is a Anglophone writer whose memoir is being celebrated so much in India today, and she is selling so much. But even the title of the book is borrowed from a British song. And I read the book. I mean, after I had read yours, I read the book. You will not find any cultural detailing in that book. It is a book that could have well been written in Scotland or Wales or North Carolina or somewhere else. So it's that's the problem. So what are we celebrating in India today? Everybody in the Congress party, everybody, I mean, who's a secular, liberal, progressive, which our other friend, Mr. Pratap Banu Mehta, raised some very important questions the other day at IIC at the Borkar Memorial Lecture. Very interesting questions of what this whole secular business is or what the progressive business is. Because if you don't question that on those grounds, you never arrive at the right kind of ideas. So this whole thing of what are we celebrating, despite speaking so much about diversity and cultural diversity, that is another thing which we have to ask ourselves, because all the questions that face today, let us be very honest, face India today are cultural. And if one has to understand the complexity of India, then one has to understand cultural politics and cultural wars. And what is the principal opposition party of this country doing? Mr. Radhakrishna is here, so I'm very happy to carry the news back to Mr. Kharge. What is the principal opposition party of India doing? The principal opposition party of India is trying to fight cultural wars with fact-checking, with data experts. But Modi has an air cover of Hindutva, which will guarantee him 25% of the vote, any which way. So how is it that the Congress party is bereft of any cultural strategy or any cultural narrative? And if that is to be found, one has to read this book, because there are a lot of interesting things where, I'll come to the last part, but to just mention one other thing about the Congress party, in the absence of a cultural strategy, what is the Congress doing? The Congress is borrowing the Dravidian strategy. And the Dravidian strategy, as South Indians we know, is a very exclusionary strategy, Periyarist idea. And yesterday, Mr. Stalin has inaugurated a portrait of Periyar in Oxford. So the Congress cannot be borrowing a Dravidian model, because the big umbrella party, which I spoke about, the moderates going away, conservatives going away, the big umbrella party had all of it inside it. If you read Mr. Siddiqui's book, you'll read so much about Govind Ballabh Pant in the initial years and the kind of communalism that he represented. In fact, I was telling him before we came on the stage that there's a very interesting speech he made in 1952, after I get the year wrong, but immediately after the first general elections, when there was a by-election. And you know what his campaign line was? He becomes the Home Minister of India under Nehru in 1955. Imagine the Home Minister of India. And his campaign line was, "Don't vote for the socialists, they will destroy your temples." And India does not need an opposition, because we have to build a new model of democracy without an opposition. This is Mr. Govind Ballabh Pant. This is, if you want the exact speech, you can find it in this great biography of Sujata Prasad and Vimal Prasad on JP. So this is the kind of thing that we are talking about. So we need to be aware of that. And finally, Mr. Siddiqui's book, by raising issues about the Indian Muslim and their existential dilemma, is only speaking about cultural issues. He is not speaking political issues or problems of power. He is actually raising political issues. For instance, on pages 328 and 329, where he is a group of public intellectuals or Muslim intellectuals have gone to meet Mohan Bhagwat. See, that's what I find very interesting, because that's what I said. He's never incommunicado. He's always communicating. He's always reaching out. So there are 4 issues that Bhagwat kind of highlights, the RSS chief. And that starts with the very existential, how do we call the Indian Muslim? And this is a dialogue he's having 75 years after India got independence. And then there is this question being asked, should he be a Bharatiya Muslim? Should he be a Hindustani Muslim? And Mr. Siddiqui suggests, can he be a Hindi Muslim? So where are we? 75 years after independence, we are still trying to denote a phrase for a Muslim. So this is the kind of secularism that we have practiced. So and then, there is the other thing that they speak about is, so here Mr. Siddiqui writes, Bhagwat was of the opinion that India was a Hindu Rashtra. By his definition of Hindu included all those who lived on this land. All these terms were appropriate as long as Muslims regarded India as their motherland. So that means he wanted everybody, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs and other minorities, to think of themselves as culturally Hindus. So this is the dominant debate in India, but do you get to hear it anywhere in your oppositional discourse? Nowhere. So what are we fighting? We don't even know what we are fighting. So the second thing in that whole exchange with Mohan Bhagwat is about the use of the word kafir. It's very interesting again. And they mean, to describe a non-Muslim, they say, Mr. Bhagwat says, you shouldn't be calling them kafir. So they accept. They said, that's a misnomer, we will change and all that. And the third thing is about cow slaughter. And the fourth thing is about jihad. So these are the crucial, fault lines that we are facing. And that he very eloquently discusses that in his book. As part of the same conversation, Mr. Siddiqui writes that in response to Mr. Bhagwat, we affirm that Muslims, like other Indians, were devoted to the nation and considered it their motherland, but only exception to the act of worshipping Bharat Mata as a goddess. Now, I found that very interesting because that's exactly the debate that we are having today in Karnataka. Banu Mushtaq has been invited to inaugurate the Dasara. And what is the BJP's objection? She made a speech in 2023 where she said, I don't feel part of you because you've confined the Kannada identity to Bhuvaneshwari, that is the mother of Bharat Mata, and you have vermilion and turmeric in your Kannada flag. So that's exactly how it is getting framed. So that is the debate Mr. Siddiqui is also having with Mr. Mohan Bhagwat. But has anybody in the oppositional space, I mean, what are they telling in Karnataka? Oh no, it's a tradition. Oh, it's not a religious thing. It's a state-sponsored thing. If it's a state-sponsored thing, is it a constitutional thing to, continue with the same rituals? No. So there is the answer to communalism, or the answer to the question of the Indian Muslim, is not the lazy liberal exercise of reading the preamble of the Indian Constitution. Nothing is going to get sorted out by that. That's there as a fantastic reference. It should be there. It's a kind of, a guiding light. But till that cannot be the strategy. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. So these are some of the very interesting things that you find in this book. I will not take much time. I will end with a small disagreement I have, because Mr. Ramesh Kumar spoke of 2 or 3 disagreements. I think I'm entitled to speak about one disagreement. That's about when he writes about Rahul Gandhi. In fact, I've written a political commentary on Rahul Gandhi, so I have tried to study him quite closely. So Mr. Siddiqui writes, it is perhaps an exaggeration to compare Rahul Gandhi with Mahatma Gandhi, but today his case and natural body language are as good as Gandhi's back in the day. Rahul is as comfortable answering questions in Harvard as he is comfortable discussing problems of railway porters and village cobblers with him. Rahul's biggest strength today is that he has overcome fear. So, I discuss all of this threadbare in my book. And my thing is that it's good for Rahul's personal salvation, but it's not about the salvation of his party. In fact, the political party which got one of Karnataka's finest Dalit leaders, Mallikarjun Kharge, as their president, does not even know how to legalize. That's the sad part of the party. And so that is where this whole thing is. And my favorite section in the book is on Mayavati, Manyavar and Mayavati. That whole fight that you describe, Mayavati was being chained and of the flat, and Mr. Kanchiram is not opening the door, and it's creating a scene in the street, and Mr. Siddiqui rescues her, so he calms the whole thing. But then what happens to Kanchiram at the end? He writes that beautifully as well. So all that is there as part of this book. It's if you want to understand Mr. Siddiqui, don't do the shortcut of listening to some of his interviews that he has given on the book, because the banal, anchors have tried to do great disservice to what he has written. They are just caught on to one or two things, and it was like one great interviewer who, my friend wrote a great biography of Vajpayee, and the only thing that the interviewer was interested was in the sex life of Mr. Vajpayee. So, I mean, this man had worked on for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years on the book, and the only thing that the interviewer would be interested is in that small little passing line. And so please don't listen to his interviews, read the book. It's eminently readable. Thank you for inviting.